On the eve of my daughter's wedding, I caught her fiance in the car with his secretary. When I confronted him, he threatened to throw me out of my own house. I just walked away in silence, but on the wedding day I brought a very special guest. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Bonnie, and I'm 58 years old. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of my daughter Mila's life. 26 years of watching her grow, supporting her dreams, and celebrating her victories had led to this moment. Her wedding to Matthew, the man she'd been dating for 3 years and claimed to love with all her heart. I should have been home. Double-checking the final details, making sure the flowers would arrive on time, or perhaps having a quiet glass of wine while reflecting on how proud I was of the woman my daughter had become. Instead, I found myself driving to Matthew's office at 8:30 in the evening because Mila had asked me to drop off the wedding rings he'd forgotten at our house. Such a simple favor. Such an innocent errand. How could I have known it would change everything? The parking lot was nearly empty, which struck me as odd. Matthew had told Mila he'd be working late on an important project, but most of the office building looked dark. Only a few cars remained scattered across the vast lot. I spotted Matthew's silver BMW immediately, the one he was so proud of, the one he never let anyone else drive. As I walked closer, something made me pause. The car was running, exhaust visible in the cool evening air, and it was rocking slightly. My first thought was that maybe Matthew was on a business call, perhaps agitated about work stress. But as I got within 20 feet of the vehicle, I could see clearly through the rear window. My heart stopped. Matthew was in the back seat with a woman. Not just talking. Not just sitting. They were in a passionate embrace, clothes disheveled, completely lost in each other. The woman had long dark hair. And was wearing what looked like a business suit. Even from my angle, I could see this wasn't some random encounter. The way they moved together, the familiarity of their touches, this had been going on for a while. I stood there frozen, the small velvet box containing the wedding rings burning in my palm. Part of me wanted to turn around, get back in my car, and pretend I'd never seen anything. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dim parking lot lighting, but I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just watched as my daughter's fiancé, less than 24 hours before their wedding, betrayed her in the most intimate way possible. The woman in the car turned slightly, and I got a clear view of her face. She was young, probably early 20s, with striking features and an expensive-looking watch. This wasn't some desperate mistake or moment of weakness. The way she laughed at something Matthew whispered, the way she traced her fingers along his jaw, they were comfortable with each other. This was a relationship. Finally, my paralysis broke. I couldn't just stand there like some voyeur. I needed to confront this. I needed answers. My daughter's entire future was at stake. I walked directly to the car and knocked firmly on the driver's side window. The reaction inside was immediate chaos. Matthew practically threw the woman off him, scrambling to straighten his clothes while she dove toward the floor of the back seat. I could see the panic in his eyes as he fumbled to roll down the window, his face flushed and his hair completely disheveled. "Bonnie," he said, forcing what had to be the most unconvincing smile I'd ever seen. "What are you doing here?" I held up the ring box, my voice surprisingly steady despite the hurricane of emotion swirling inside me. "Mila asked me to bring you the rings. You forgot them at dinner." "Oh, right, the rings." He was still trying to fix his appearance, but his shirt was buttoned wrong and his tie was completely crooked. "Thanks for bringing them by." I could hear the woman in the back seat trying to stay quiet, but her breathing was audible. Matthew's eyes kept darting toward the back of the car, clearly desperate for me to leave. "Who's your friend?" I asked, my tone calm but my eyes never leaving his face. "Friend?" He let out a nervous laugh. "What friend? I'm here alone, just working on some last-minute presentations for next week." "Matthew." I leaned closer to the window. "I can see her." The facade cracked. His forced smile disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. The transformation was so sudden and complete that for a moment, I felt like I was looking at a complete stranger. "Get in the car, Bonnie." His voice had changed entirely. Gone was the charming, respectful tone he always used around me. This was sharp, commanding, almost threatening. "Excuse me?" I said. "Get in the car. We need to talk." Against my better judgment, I opened the passenger door and slid into the seat. The woman in the back was now fully dressed and sitting up, though she avoided making eye contact with me. She was even younger than I'd initially thought, with perfectly applied makeup despite their recent activities. "Bonnie, meet Jessica," Matthew said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "My assistant. And my girlfriend for the past 8 months. The casual way he said it hit me like a physical blow. 8 months. While he was planning a wedding with my daughter. While he was picking out china patterns and discussing honeymoon destinations. "How could you do this to Mila?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Matthew laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do what to Mila? Mila is getting exactly what she wants tomorrow. A big wedding, a successful husband, a beautiful house. She'll have everything she's ever dreamed of. You're cheating on her. I'm giving her security. His eyes were ice cold now, all pretense gone. Mila wants the fairy tale, Bonnie. The dress? The ring, the status. She doesn't actually care about me as a person. And frankly, I don't care about her either. This is a business arrangement that works for both of us. I stared at him in horror. A business arrangement? You're talking about my daughter. Your daughter who's been living in my condo for free for 2 years. Your daughter who quit her job because I told her she didn't need to work. Your daughter who's been planning this wedding like it's her career. He leaned closer, and I could smell expensive cologne mixed with something else, the scent of betrayal. Face it, Bonnie. Mila isn't marrying me for love. She's marrying me. For lifestyle. That's not true. Mila loves you. Mila loves what I represent. And after tomorrow, she'll have it. A husband with a successful business, a beautiful home, financial security. What I do in my private time is irrelevant. Jessica finally spoke up, her voice confident and unapologetic. Matthew and I have real feelings for each other. What he has with Mila is just convenient. I felt sick. So what happens after the wedding? You just keep seeing each other while Mila believes she's in a loving marriage? Matthew shrugged. Mila will be busy with her new life. Playing house, decorating, probably planning babies. She won't pay attention to what I'm doing. And if she finds out? His expression turned dangerous. She won't. Because you're not going to tell her. Of course I'm going to tell her. She's my daughter. No, Bonnie. You're not. He leaned back in his seat, completely relaxed now, as if he held all the cards. Because if you do, I'll make sure Mila knows exactly how I feel about her interfering mother. I'll tell her how you've been trying to break us up from the beginning. How jealous you are of our relationship. How you've been looking for any excuse to ruin her happiness. That's not true. Isn't it? How many times have you questioned my intentions? How many times have you suggested Mila wait longer before getting married? How many little comments have you made about our relationship? He smiled, and it was cruel. Mila already thinks you're jealous of what we have. It wouldn't take much to convince her that you're lying to destroy her wedding. The worst part was, he was right. I had questioned their relationship. I had suggested they wait. Not because I was jealous, but because something had always felt off about Matthew. I'd never been able to put my finger on it, but he'd always seemed too smooth, too perfect, too eager to sweep Mila off her feet. Besides, Matthew continued, after tomorrow, Mila and I will be moving to the house I bought across town. She'll be busy with her new life. You won't see much of her anyway. What do you mean? I mean, Bonnie, that your little visits and weekly dinners and constant involvement in our lives will be coming to an end. Mila needs to focus on being a wife now, not on managing her mother's feelings. The threat was clear. He wasn't just planning to cheat on my daughter. He was planning to isolate her from me entirely. I sat there in stunned silence, the wedding ring still clutched in my hand. Everything I thought I knew about my daughter's future had just been shattered. The man she was marrying tomorrow morning was a stranger to me, cruel, manipulative, and completely without conscience. So we understand each other? Matthew asked, his voice back to its normal, charming tone as if the past 10 minutes had never happened. I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. Good. Now, why don't you give me those rings and head home? You have a big day tomorrow. Wouldn't want the mother of the bride to look tired. I handed him the box with trembling fingers and got out of the car without another word. As I walked back to my own vehicle, I could hear them laughing behind me. Actually laughing. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with everything I'd just witnessed. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made a decision. I couldn't let Matthew destroy my daughter's life. I couldn't let him isolate her from me. And I certainly couldn't let him get away with this betrayal, but I also knew that simply telling Mila what I'd seen wouldn't be enough. She was so in love with the idea of her perfect wedding, her perfect husband, her perfect new life. If I came to her with accusations the night before her wedding, she'd never believe me. She'd think exactly what Matthew predicted, that I was jealous and trying to ruin her happiness. No, I needed proof. I needed evidence. I needed to find a way to make Mila see the truth with her own eyes. As I sat in my car in the darkness of my garage, I realized something had fundamentally changed inside me. For 58 years, I'd been the kind of person who avoided conflict, who tried to keep peace, who worried more about other people's feelings than my own, but watching my daughter's fiance betray her so casually, so cruelly, had awakened something in me that I didn't know existed. A fierce protectiveness that would stop at nothing to save my child from a lifetime of deception and heartbreak. Matthew thought he had won tonight. He thought he had intimidated me into silence. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Matthew's smug face, heard his cruel laughter, felt the weight of his threats pressing down on me like a stone. By 4 a.m, I gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee, my hands still shaking as I tried to process everything that had happened. Mila would be waking up in a few hours, excited and glowing, ready for what she believed would be the most beautiful day of her life. The thought of her innocent happiness made my chest ache with a pain so sharp I could barely breathe. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, staring at the blank screen. Where do you even begin when you need to investigate someone? I'd never done anything like this before. I was a retired elementary school teacher, not some detective. But I had to try. I had to find something that would make Mila see the truth. I started with the obvious: social media. Matthew's Facebook page was carefully curated, filled with professional photos and posts about business achievements. Nothing personal, nothing that would give away his true character. His Instagram was similar: expensive restaurants, business trips, photos with Mila at various events. The perfect boyfriend, at least on the surface. But then I noticed something. In several of his photos from business trips over the past year, there was a young woman in the background. Different events, different cities, but the same face. Dark hair, professional attire. Jessica. I screenshot every photo where she appeared, my heart racing as the evidence mounted. They'd been traveling together for business, staying in the same hotels, attending the same conferences. How had Mila not noticed? Or maybe she had noticed and Matthew had convinced her it was all perfectly innocent. By 6 a.m, I'd filled a folder with screenshots, but I knew it wasn't enough. Pictures of them at business events could be explained away. I needed something more concrete, more undeniable. That's when I remembered Matthew's ex-girlfriend, the one before Mila. Her name was Sarah, and I'd met her once at a coffee shop about 4 years ago, completely by accident. She'd been sitting alone, looking devastated, and when she recognized me as Matthew's girlfriend's mother, he'd been dating someone else then. She'd approached me with this desperate look in her eyes. She'd tried to tell me something about Matthew that day, something about his character, but I'd been polite and distant. I hadn't wanted to get involved in drama. I'd made some excuse and left quickly. Now I wished desperately that I'd listened. Finding Sarah wasn't easy. I remembered her last name was Johnson, but that's hardly uncommon. I tried Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Finally, I found her on a professional networking site. Sarah Johnson, marketing coordinator at a local nonprofit. The photo was definitely her, older now, but still the same gentle face I remembered. I spent an hour crafting a message to her, deleting and rewriting it multiple times. How do you explain to someone that you need their help exposing a man they once loved? How do you admit that you should have listened to them years ago? Finally, I settled on honesty. Hi Sarah, this is Bonnie Richards, Mila's mother. I don't know if you remember me, but we met briefly about 4 years ago. I think you tried to warn me about Matthew then, and I didn't listen. I'm so sorry. My daughter is supposed to marry him today, and I've discovered some things that have me very concerned. Could we possibly talk? I know this is strange, but I don't know who else to turn to. I hit send before I could lose my nerve. While I waited for a response, I decided to take a different approach. If Matthew was the kind of person who would cheat on his fiancée the night before their wedding, maybe there were other women. Maybe Jessica wasn't his first affair. I created a fake social media account and started looking through the followers and friends of Matthew's various profiles. I looked for young, attractive women who had liked multiple posts or appeared in comments. It was tedious work, but gradually, a pattern began to emerge. There was Ashley, a real estate agent who'd liked almost every one of Matthew's posts for the past 2 years. There was Monica, who worked at his gym and had left flirty comments on several photos. There was Rebecca, who seemed to show up at many of the same social events he attended. I started looking deeper into each of these women's profiles, and what I found made my stomach turn. Ashley had posted about a mystery man who took her on expensive dates but couldn't be seen in public with her. Monica had shared cryptic posts about complicated relationships and being someone's secret. Rebecca had photos from trips to the same destinations Matthew had visited for business, posted just days apart from his own travel photos. The man my daughter was about to marry wasn't just cheating with one woman. He was running what amounted to a small harem of women, all of whom believed they were special, all of whom were being deceived. Around 8 a.m, my phone buzzed with a message notification. Sarah had responded. Bonnie, I remember you. I've been wondering for years if I should reach out to you. I tried to warn several people about Matthew, but no one ever wanted to listen. I have so much to tell you. Can you meet me at Riverside Cafe on Elm Street? I can be there in an hour. I threw on clothes and drove to the cafe, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. What was I going to learn about the man my daughter thought she loved? Sarah was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee, growing cold in front of her. She looked older than in her professional photos, with worry lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when I met her 4 years ago. Thank you for coming, I said as I slid into the seat across from her. She studied my face carefully. You look like you haven't slept. What happened? I told her everything, finding Matthew with Jessica, his threats, his casual cruelty. As I spoke, Sarah's expression grew darker and more pained. That sounds exactly like him, she said when I finished. The Matthew I knew was charming and romantic at first, but underneath, he was calculating and cruel. When I tried to tell people what he was really like, they thought I was just a bitter ex-girlfriend. What did he do to you? Sarah took a shaky breath. We dated for 2 years. He moved in with me, let me support him while he was starting his business. I thought we were building a life together. Then I found out he was seeing at least 3 other women the entire time we were together. My God. But that's not the worst part. Sarah's voice dropped to almost a whisper. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He laughed. He told me I should be grateful that someone like him had given me as much attention as he had. He said I was lucky he'd stayed with me as long as he did, because I wasn't really good enough for him. The casual cruelty of it was so similar to what I'd witnessed the night before that it made me feel sick. Then he started a campaign to destroy my reputation, Sarah continued. He told everyone we knew that I was unstable, that I'd been stalking him, that I'd made up the cheating stories because I couldn't handle being dumped. He was so convincing that most of our mutual friends believed him. How is that possible? Because Matthew is very, very good at being whoever people need him to be. When he wants to charm someone, he's irresistible. When he wants to destroy someone, he's ruthless. And he's smart enough to never leave evidence of his worst behavior. I thought about Mila, about how completely taken she was with Matthew, how she defended him every time I'd expressed even the slightest concern. Sarah, I need proof. Mila won't believe me without it. She's so in love with him, or at least with the version of him she knows. I understand. But Bonnie, you have to know that even with proof, this won't be easy. Matthew doesn't just let people go. If you threaten his plans, he'll come after you. He'll come after Mila. He'll try to turn her against you completely. He's already planning to do that anyway. He told me last night that he's going to isolate her from me after the wedding. Sarah nodded grimly. That's his pattern. He separates his victims from anyone who might see through him or offer them support. By the time they realize what's happened, they're completely dependent on him and have no one else to turn to. Then, we have to stop this wedding. I've been thinking about that since I got your message this morning. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. I kept everything from when Matthew and I were together. Text messages, emails, photos of him with other women that I managed to get. I also have contact information for 2 other women he destroyed after me. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. Why didn't you use this before? I tried. But Matthew is very good at discrediting people. Every time I showed someone evidence, he managed to explain it away or make me look like the crazy one. But you're different. How? You're Mila's mother. You have credibility with her that I never had. And if we do this right, if we present the evidence in the right way, at the right time, she'll have to listen. I opened the envelope and began looking through the contents. Text messages where Matthew admitted to seeing other women. Photos of him with various girlfriends, some taken on the same days he'd told Sarah he was working late. Email conversations where he discussed his relationships with other women like they were business transactions, but the most damning evidence was a recorded phone conversation. He called me 6 months ago, Sarah explained. Completely out of the blue. He was drunk, and he started bragging about his engagement to Mila. He said it was his best deal yet, a beautiful, naive girl from a good family who would give him respectability and ask for nothing in return. He talked about how easy it was to manipulate her, how she believed everything he told her. I stared at the recording device in my hand. He said all this on a phone call? He was drunk and cocky. He thought I was still too broken by what he'd done to me to be a threat. He wanted to hurt me by telling me how successful he was, how happy he was with someone else. He had no idea I was recording everything. This was it. This was the proof I needed. But looking at the wedding invitation on my phone, I realized I had less than 4 hours before Mila would be walking down the aisle. Sarah, I need a huge favor. Will you come to the wedding with me? She looked startled. To the wedding? Bonnie, I can't just show up at your daughter's wedding uninvited. You won't be uninvited. You'll be my guest. My +1. I reached across the table and grabbed her hands. I can't do this alone. If I try to stop the wedding by myself, Matthew will convince everyone that I'm just a jealous mother trying to ruin my daughter's happiness. But if you're there, with the evidence, with your story, maybe we can make people see the truth. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the envelope between us. If I do this, there's no going back. Matthew will try to destroy me again. He might succeed this time. But if we don't do this, he'll destroy my daughter instead. And probably other women after her. Finally, Sarah looked up at me, and I saw something I hadn't noticed before: strength. Despite everything Matthew had put her through, despite the pain and humiliation, she hadn't been broken. Okay, she said quietly. Let's save your daughter. As we left the cafe together, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Not just hope that we could stop this wedding, but hope that maybe, finally, Matthew would face consequences for the pain he'd caused. The wedding was in 3 hours. It was time to get ready. Sarah and I drove back to my house in tense silence. Both of us lost in our own thoughts about what we were about to do. The weight of the evidence in that envelope felt heavier than it should have, like it contained not just papers and recordings, but the power to either save my daughter or destroy our relationship forever. As we pulled into my driveway, I noticed Mila's car parked on the street. My heart nearly stopped. She was supposed to be at the salon getting ready with her bridesmaids. What was she doing here? That's Mila's car, I told Sarah, panic creeping into my voice. She can't see you yet. If she does, Matthew will know something's wrong. Sarah nodded, understanding immediately. I'll wait in my car around the corner. Text me when it's safe. I walked into my house to find Mila standing in my living room, still in her pajamas, holding a cup of coffee. Even without makeup, even with her hair in a messy bun, she was radiant. The happiness practically glowed from her skin, and seeing it made my heart ache with what I was about to do. Mom, she said, rushing over to hug me. I know I should be at the salon, but I had to see you first. I couldn't start the most important day of my life without talking to my mom. I hugged her back, trying to memorize the feeling of her in my arms, the way she still smelled faintly of the vanilla perfume she'd been wearing since high school. In a few hours, everything between us might be different. I'm so nervous, she continued, pulling back to look at me. But the good kind of nervous, you know? I can barely believe it's actually happening. In 6 hours, I'll be Mrs. Matthew Davidson. The name hit me like a physical blow. She said it with such pride, such joy. She had no idea she was about to marry a man who thought of her as nothing more than a business transaction. Sweetheart, are you sure you're ready? I asked, hating myself for the question but needing to try one more time. Marriage is such a big step. There's no shame in waiting a little longer if you have any doubts. Mila laughed, that bright, musical laugh that had filled my house for 26 years. Mom, we've been through this. I love Matthew more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. He's everything I've ever wanted in a husband. Kind, successful, devoted to me. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Each word was like a knife twisting in my chest. Kind. Devoted. If only she knew what I'd witnessed less than 12 hours ago. Besides, Mila continued, you raised me to trust my instincts about people. And every instinct I have tells me that Matthew is the one. I had raised her to trust her instincts. But I'd also protected her, maybe too much, from the reality that some people are very good at hiding their true nature. Matthew was a predator disguised as Prince Charming, and my innocent, trusting daughter had no experience with someone like him. Have you talked to Matthew this morning? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He texted me around 7 to say, good morning and tell me how excited he is. He's at his brother's place getting ready with the groomsmen. She smiled softly. He said he can't wait to see me at the altar. I bet he couldn't wait. Every moment that passed brought him closer to securing his prize, to legally binding my daughter to him before she could discover his true character. Mom, is everything okay? Mila asked, studying my face with concern. You seem, I don't know, tense. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just the normal mother of the bride jitters. She squeezed my hands. Thank you for everything, Mom. For all the sacrifices you made raising me alone. For supporting this wedding even though I know it's expensive. For always believing in me. No, I haven't always been the easiest daughter, especially during my teenage years, but you never gave up on me. Tears burned behind my eyes. She was thanking me for supporting her wedding to a man who was going to destroy her. She was grateful for sacrifices I'd made while having no idea I was about to make the biggest one yet, possibly sacrificing our relationship to save her from a lifetime of misery. I love you, Mila. More than you'll ever know. I love you too, Mom. She glanced at her phone. I should get going. The girls are probably wondering where I am. Will you be okay getting ready? By yourself? Actually, I invited a friend to come with me. Someone to help me with my dress and keep me company. Oh, how nice. Anyone I know? No, just an old friend. You'll meet her at the wedding. After Mila left, I texted Sarah that it was safe to come back. When she knocked on my door 10 minutes later, she looked as nervous as I felt. How are we going to do this? She asked as we sat in my living room, the envelope of evidence between us on the coffee table. I've been thinking about that. We can't just interrupt the ceremony. That would traumatize Mila and humiliate her in front of everyone. She knows. But we also can't wait until after they're married. What about during the reception? Before they sign the marriage certificate? I shook my head. Too late. The damage will already be done. She'll already be his wife, at least ceremonially. And Matthew will have had hours to prepare for whatever we might throw at him. Sarah picked up the recording device and turned it over in her hands. There is one moment when we might have the best chance. When? During the ceremony itself. There's always that moment when the officiant asks if anyone objects to the marriage. It's usually just ceremonial, but legally, it's a real question. The idea made my stomach clench with anxiety. Sarah, if we do that, there's no taking it back. Even if Mila forgives me eventually, she'll never forget that I stood up at her wedding and objected to her marriage. But if we don't do it, she'll never forgive you for letting her marry a man you knew was going to hurt her. She was right, but that didn't make the choice any easier. Either way, I was risking my relationship with my daughter. The only difference was whether I was risking it to save her or to preserve my own comfort. There's something else we need to consider, Sarah continued. Matthew won't go down quietly. The moment we start revealing the truth about him, he's going to fight back. He'll try to discredit both of us, make us look like jealous, vindictive women who are trying to ruin an innocent man's wedding. What kind of evidence do we have that he can't explain away? Sarah opened the envelope and spread the contents across my coffee table. These text messages are pretty damning. He admits to seeing other women while he was engaged to Mila. These photos show him at hotels with Jessica during times when he told Mila he was at business conferences alone. I studied the photos. They were clear, undeniable. Matthew and Jessica checking into hotels together, having intimate dinners, walking hand in hand through airport terminals. But this is the most important piece, Sarah said, holding up the recording device. In this conversation, he admits that his engagement to Mila is essentially a business deal. He talks about how easy it is to manipulate her, how she believes everything he tells her. He even jokes about how naive she is. Hearing those words again made rage burn in my chest. How dare he speak about my daughter that way? How dare he mock her trust, her love, her innocence? The question is how to present this information in a way that Mila will actually hear it, I said. If we just stand up and start making accusations, it will sound like jealous ranting. What if we don't start with accusations? What if we start with questions? I looked at her, not understanding. When the officiant asks if anyone objects, I stand up. I don't accuse Matthew of anything. I just ask him to explain some things. Why he was at the Marriott downtown with Jessica last month when he told Mila he was in Chicago on business. Why he sent text messages to Ashley talking about their special relationship while he was engaged to Mila. You think he'll actually answer those questions? I think he'll try to lie his way out of them. But lies have a way of tangling people up, especially when they're caught off guard. And if he does try to deny everything, then we play the recording. The plan was risky, but it was the only one we had. The alternative was letting my daughter marry a man who would spend their entire marriage deceiving and manipulating her. There's one more thing, Sarah said quietly. We need to be prepared for the possibility that even with all this evidence, Mila might choose to go through with the wedding anyway. The thought had been haunting me since the night before. What if my daughter was so invested in the idea of this marriage, so in love with the life Matthew represented, that she would choose to ignore the truth? She's a smart woman, I said, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince Sarah or myself. When she sees the evidence, when she hears the recording, she'll understand what kind of man she's about to marry. I hope you're right. But Bonnie, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this might not go the way we want it to. Sometimes people would rather live with a comfortable lie than face an uncomfortable truth. I thought about Mila's glowing face that morning, her excitement about becoming Mrs. Matthew Davidson, her gratitude for all my support. Was I about to destroy the happiest day of her life for nothing? What if she chose Matthew anyway? What if she decided I was the problem? I have to try, I said finally. Even if she hates me for it, even if she never speaks to me again, I have to try to save her from him. Sarah nodded. Then we better get ready. The wedding starts in 2 hours. As we began preparing for what might be the most difficult day of my life, I found myself thinking about something Mila had said that morning. She thanked me for never giving up on her, for always believing in her. What she didn't know was that I was about to prove just how far I was willing to go to protect her, even if it meant risking everything we had together. I looked at myself in the mirror as I put on my mother of the bride dress, a elegant navy blue that Mila had helped me pick out months ago. In a few hours, I would either be celebrating my daughter's marriage to the man of her dreams, or I would be standing in the ruins of our relationship, hoping that someday she would understand that everything I did was out of love. There was no way to know which it would be until I was standing in that church, watching my daughter's face as the truth about her fiancé was finally revealed. The only thing I knew for certain was that I couldn't let her walk into this marriage blind. Whatever the cost to me, whatever the cost to our relationship, I had to give her the chance to make an informed choice about the rest of her life, even if she chose to hate me for it. The church was perfect. White roses cascaded from every pew. Golden light streamed through stained glass windows, and soft piano music filled the air with romance. Everything Mila had dreamed of for her special day. Everything that was about to be destroyed by the truth. Sarah and I arrived early and took seats in the third row, close enough to be heard clearly when the moment came, but far enough back to avoid drawing immediate attention. I watched as guests filed in, filling the pews with friends and family members who had no idea they were about to witness something very different from the beautiful wedding ceremony they expected. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I clutched my purse, inside which Sarah had hidden the recording device and copies of the most damning evidence. Every few minutes, I found myself questioning whether we were doing the right thing. Was it fair to expose Matthew's true nature in front of all these people? Was it fair to humiliate Mila on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life? But then I remembered his cruel laughter in that parking lot, the casual way he'd admitted to betraying my daughter, his plans to isolate her from everyone who loved her. This wasn't about fairness. This was about saving Mila from a man who would destroy her piece by piece, year after year. "Bonnie, look," Sarah whispered, nudging me gently. I followed her gaze to see Matthew at the altar, looking devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo. He was chatting with his best man, completely relaxed, occasionally glancing toward the back of the church with that charming smile that had fooled so many people, including my daughter. As I watched him, I tried to see him the way Mila did. Tall, successful, confident. The kind of man who seemed to have everything together, who could provide security and status and the lifestyle every woman was supposed to want. No wonder she'd fallen for him. He was very good at being exactly what people needed him to be, but I'd seen behind the mask now. I knew what he really was. The music changed, signaling the start of the processional. My heart began racing as Mila's bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their soft pink dresses, smiling and glowing with happiness for their friend. Then came the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The wedding march began, and everyone stood. At the back of the church, the doors opened, and there was my daughter. She was breathtaking. Her dress was a vision of white silk and lace, her grandmother's pearls gleaming at her throat, her face radiant with joy. She walked down the aisle with such grace and confidence, her eyes locked on Matthew's face, completely oblivious to the fact that her entire world was about to change. I felt tears streaming down my cheeks as I watched her approach the altar. This might be the last time I ever saw my daughter look at me with love instead of hatred. After today, I might become the mother who ruined her wedding, who destroyed her happiness, who couldn't bear to see her daughter succeed where she had failed. But as painful as that thought was, the alternative was worse. I couldn't watch her bind herself legally to a man who would spend their marriage deceiving her, cheating on her, and gradually isolating her from everyone who might help her see the truth. When Mila reached the altar, Matthew took her hands and looked into her eyes with what appeared to be genuine love and devotion. If I hadn't witnessed his true nature the night before, even I might have believed his performance. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Mila and Matthew in holy matrimony." I tried to focus on the minister's words, but my mind kept racing ahead to the moment when he would ask if anyone objected to the marriage. How much time did we have? 5 minutes? 10? Sarah must have been thinking the same thing, because she reached over and squeezed my hand. Her palm was as sweaty as mine, her breathing as shallow. We were both terrified of what we were about to do, but we were going to do it anyway. The ceremony proceeded with traditional vows, prayers, and readings. Mila and Matthew exchanged rings, their faces glowing with happiness. Several times, I almost lost my nerve. They looked so perfect together, so genuinely happy. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Matthew really did love her. Maybe what I'd witnessed was just a moment of weakness, a last-minute panic before committing to marriage. But then I remembered Jessica in the back seat of his car. The casual cruelty in his voice when he talked about my daughter, his plans to cut me out of her life entirely. No, I wasn't wrong. Matthew was exactly what Sarah had said he was, a predator who was very good at wearing the mask his victims needed to see. "If there is anyone here present," the minister said, his voice carrying clearly through the church. Who knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage? Speak now or forever hold your peace. This was it. The moment we'd been planning for. The moment that would change everything. I felt Sarah tense beside me, preparing to stand, but before she could move, something unexpected happened. A voice from the back of the church called out, "I object." Every head in the church turned toward the back, including mine. A woman was standing in the last pew, tall and elegant, with graying hair and an expensive suit. I'd never seen her before, but something about her bearing suggested authority, confidence. Matthew's face went white. Not surprised white, but terrified white. He knew who this woman was. "Excuse me," the minister said, clearly flustered by this disruption to what should have been a routine ceremony. "Ma'am, may I ask who you are and what your objection is?" The woman began walking down the aisle, her heels clicking against the marble floor in the sudden silence. Every step was deliberate, confident. When she reached the altar, she turned to face the congregation. "My name is Victoria Davidson," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the church. "I'm Matthew's mother." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled guests. Matthew's mother? But Matthew had told everyone his parents were dead. He'd said he was an orphan, that it was just him and his brother in the world. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Matthew's voice was strained, desperate. "I told you not to come." "You told me not to come to my own son's wedding?" Victoria's voice was ice cold. "You told your bride that your parents were dead rather than invite your own mother to your wedding?" Mila's face went from confusion to shock to something approaching horror. "Matthew, you said your parents died in a car accident when you were 21. "Mom, please," Matthew said, ignoring Mila's question. "Can we discuss this later? This isn't the time or place." "No, Matthew. This is exactly the time and place." Victoria turned to address Mila directly. "Dear, I'm sorry to interrupt your wedding, but there are things you need to know about my son before you legally bind yourself to him." The church was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Everyone was staring at the altar, where Mila stood in her beautiful dress, looking completely lost and confused. "Mrs. Davidson," the minister said, "perhaps we could take a brief recess and discuss this privately." "There's nothing private about what I have to say," Victoria replied. "My son has a pattern of lying to the women he becomes involved with. He tells them whatever he thinks they want to hear, creates whatever version of himself he believes will be most appealing to them." "That's not true," Matthew said, but his voice lacked conviction. Sweat was beading on his forehead despite the cool air in the church. "Isn't it?" Victoria reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder. "I have documentation of 3 previous engagements, Matthew. 3 other women you convinced to marry you after telling them elaborate lies about your background, your family, your intentions." Sarah and I exchanged glances. We'd come prepared to expose Matthew's cheating, but this was something else entirely. This was bigger than we'd imagined. 3? Mila's voice was barely a whisper. "Matthew, what is she talking about?" "She's confused," Matthew said quickly. "She's been having some mental health issues. Memory problems. She doesn't know what she's saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Victoria snapped. "And I have the documentation to prove it. Marriage certificates, divorce papers, police reports from 2 of the women who had to get restraining orders against you." The crowd began to murmur, a low buzz of shock and confusion rippling through the church. Several people pulled out their phones, probably to start recording what was clearly becoming a dramatic confrontation rather than a wedding ceremony. "Mila," Victoria continued, "did my son tell you he was married to a woman named Jennifer Collins for 2 years? Did he mention his 8-month marriage to Sandra Williams? What about his engagement to Rachel Murphy, which ended when she discovered he was stealing money from her business account?" Each revelation hit Mila like a physical blow. I could see her swaying slightly, gripping her bouquet so tightly that her knuckles were white. "Matthew," she said, her voice shaking, "tell me this isn't true. Tell me she's lying." Matthew looked around the church wildly, like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. His charming mask was completely gone now, replaced by something desperate and ugly. "Mila, baby, you have to listen to me," he said, reaching for her hands. "My mother is sick. She's been stalking me for years, trying to ruin my relationships because she's jealous of my success. Everything she's saying is lies designed to hurt me." But Mila stepped back, away from his reaching hands. "If she's lying, then explain the documentation she says she has. Explain why you told me your parents were dead." Matthew started, then stopped. For the first time since I'd known him, he seemed to be at a loss for words. That's when Sarah stood up. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the church. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have some additional information that might be relevant." Matthew's head snapped toward Sarah, and the expression on his face was pure terror. He recognized her, of course. And he knew exactly what she was capable of revealing. "Who are you?" Mila asked, though she was still staring at Matthew, trying to read the panic in his eyes. "My name is Sarah Johnson. I was engaged to Matthew 3 years ago." Another collective gasp from the congregation. How many women had this man deceived? How many lives had he destroyed? "That's not true," Matthew said, but his voice was weak now, unconvincing. "Sarah, you need to leave. This is harassment." "Is it harassment to tell the truth?" Sarah pulled out her phone and held it up. "I have a recording of a conversation Matthew and I had 6 months ago, where he admitted that his engagement to Mila was essentially a business arrangement. Where he talked about how easy it was to manipulate her, how naive she was." "Play it," Victoria said immediately. "Let everyone hear what kind of man my son really is." "No," Matthew said, stepping forward aggressively. "You can't do this. This is my wedding. These women are trying to ruin my life because they're jealous and bitter." But Mila was no longer looking at Matthew. She was looking at Sarah, and then at Victoria, and then at me. Her eyes were wide with a terrible understanding. "Mom," she said quietly, "did you know about this?" My heart stopped. This was the moment I'd been dreading. The moment when my daughter realized that not only was her fiance a liar and a cheater, but that her own mother had been keeping secrets from her. "Mila," I said, standing up slowly, "I found out last night. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you." "Last night?" Her voice was getting stronger now, fueled by growing anger. "You've known since last night that my fiancé is a fraud, and you didn't tell me?" "I wanted to, sweetheart. But I knew you wouldn't believe me without proof. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Mila laughed, but there was no humor in it. "By letting me walk down the aisle to marry a man you knew was lying to me? By letting me humiliate myself in front of everyone I know?" The pain in her voice was unbearable. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, that in trying to save my daughter, I would lose her completely. "Mila, please," I said, "let us explain everything. Let Sarah play the recording. Let Mrs. Davidson show you the documentation. You deserve to know the truth about who you were about to marry." But Mila was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to hear any more. I can't. I need to get out of here." She gathered up her dress and ran down the aisle toward the back of the church, her white train trailing behind her like a broken dream. Several of her bridesmaids ran after her, calling her name. The church erupted in chaos. Guests were talking loudly among themselves, some trying to follow Mila, others staring at Matthew with undisguised disgust. Matthew himself seemed frozen at the altar, his face pale and his hands shaking. Victoria walked over to where Sarah and I were standing. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. I just couldn't let my son destroy another innocent woman." "How did you know?" I asked. "How did you know to come today?" "I've been tracking Matthew's activities for years, trying to warn his victims when I could. When I found out about the engagement, I hired a private investigator. I was planning to approach Mila privately, but when I saw the wedding announcement in the paper, I realized I was running out of time." Sarah looked toward the back of the church, where Mila had disappeared. "Do you think she'll be okay?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, she's probably more angry with me than with Matthew. I betrayed her trust by not telling her the truth immediately. But as painful as Mila's anger was, I knew we'd done the right thing. Better for her to be angry with me than to spend years married to a man who would have destroyed her piece by piece. The question now was whether she would ever forgive me for saving her life. I found Mila in the church's small bridal preparation room, surrounded by her bridesmaids who were trying unsuccessfully to comfort her. Her beautiful wedding dress was crumpled around her as she sat on a small sofa, mascara streaking down her cheeks, her carefully styled hair beginning to come loose from its pins. When she saw me in the doorway, her eyes flashed with an anger I'd never seen before. "Get out," she said, her voice raw from crying. "I don't want to see you right now." "Mila, please. Let me explain." "Explain what, Mom? That you've been lying to me just like Matthew has? That you knew my entire wedding was based on a fraud and you let me walk down that aisle anyway?" Her bridesmaids looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing they were witnessing something too personal and painful for their presence. One by one, they quietly excused themselves, leaving us alone in the small room that still smelled of hairspray and the roses from her bouquet, now scattered across the floor. "I wasn't lying to you," I said, stepping closer but maintaining distance when I saw her flinch. "I found out about Matthew yesterday evening. I spent the entire night trying to figure out how to tell you in a way that you would actually hear. You could have called me. You could have come to my apartment. You could have told me this morning when I came to see you. And would you have believed me?" I asked gently. If I had called you at midnight and told you that I saw Matthew cheating on you, what would you have done? Mila opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. She would have assumed I was having some kind of breakdown. Or that I was jealous of her happiness, or that I'd misunderstood something innocent. That's different, she said finally, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Is it? Mila, you've been so in love with Matthew, so excited about this wedding. So invested in the life you thought you were building with him. If I had come to you without proof, without witnesses, with nothing but my word against his, you would have chosen to believe him. She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she looked up again, her eyes were filled with a pain that went beyond anger. How long, she asked quietly. How long has he been cheating on me? I don't know for certain. But based on what Sarah told me, and what his mother revealed, I think this is a pattern for him. I don't think he's ever been faithful to anyone. Mila let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. 3 previous engagements. 3 other women who thought they were marrying the love of their life. How could I have been so stupid? You weren't stupid, sweetheart. You were trusting. You loved someone, and you believed he loved you back. There's nothing stupid about that. But there were signs, weren't there? She looked at me with desperate eyes. Looking back, I can think of a dozen times when something felt off, when his stories didn't quite add up, when he was evasive about his past. I just made excuses for everything because I wanted so badly for this to be real. I sat down beside her on the small sofa, and for the first time since the confrontation at the altar, she didn't pull away from me. What am I supposed to do now? She asked, her voice small and lost. I have 300 people out there who came to see me get married. I have a reception planned, a honeymoon booked, a life that was supposed to start today. And it's all been a lie. You're supposed to be grateful, I said firmly. Grateful that you found out now, before you legally bound yourself to him. Grateful that you didn't waste years of your life, didn't have children with him, didn't become financially dependent on him. Grateful? She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Mom, I just had my wedding destroyed in front of everyone I know. The man I thought loved me has been lying to me about everything, including having a living mother. I found out that my own mother has been keeping secrets from me. How exactly am I supposed to be grateful? Because, I said, reaching for her hand, as painful as this is, it's better than the alternative. Matthew wasn't planning to love and cherish you, Mila. He was planning to use you, control you, isolate you from everyone who cares about you. Including me. I told her about his threats the night before, about his plans to cut me out of her life after the wedding, about the casual cruelty with which he discussed their relationship. With each revelation, I watched her face change. Watched the last vestiges of her love for Matthew transform into something harder and colder. He said I was naive, she asked quietly. He said you were easy to manipulate. That you believed everything he told you without question. She was quiet for several minutes, processing everything I'd told her. Outside the small room, I could hear the sounds of the church emptying out, guests leaving in confusion and disappointment. I need to hear the recording, she said finally. Are you sure? It's cruel, Mila. The way he talks about you. I need to hear it. I need to know exactly what kind of man I almost married. I went to find Sarah, who was waiting in the hallway with Victoria. When I explained what Mila wanted, Sarah nodded grimly and followed me back into the bridal room. Mila, Sarah said. Gently, I'm so sorry about all of this. I know this isn't how you wanted your wedding day to go. Play the recording, Mila said, her voice steady now. I want to hear everything. Sarah pulled out her phone and pressed play. Matthew's voice filled the small room, slightly slurred from alcohol but perfectly clear in its cruelty. The engagement to Mila is the best deal I've ever made. Beautiful girl, good family, completely naive. She believes everything I tell her. I could tell her the sky was purple and she'd nod and agree. It's almost too easy. Mila flinched as if she'd been slapped. The recording continued. She quit her job because I told her she didn't need to work. Moved into my place because I convinced her we were saving money for the wedding. She's so grateful for everything I do, so eager to please. It's perfect, really. I get a beautiful, devoted wife who won't ask questions, and she gets the lifestyle she's always wanted. What about love? Sarah's voice on the recording asked. Matthew laughed. Love is for people who can't afford better arrangements. Mila thinks. She loves me, and I let her believe it because it makes her more compliant. But real love? That's what I have with Jessica. That's real passion, real connection. Mila is just comfortable. The recording ended, and the room fell into silence. Mila sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, her face expressionless. I'm sorry, Sarah said quietly. I know how much that must hurt to hear. Actually, Mila said, her voice surprisingly calm, it doesn't hurt as much as I expected it to. Because now I know that everything I felt, everything I thought we had together, was real for me. My love was real. My hopes and dreams were real. The only thing that was fake was him. She stood up and walked to the small mirror on the wall, studying her reflection. Her makeup was ruined, her hair was a mess, and her dress was wrinkled, but there was something different in her eyes now. Something stronger. I need to go out there, she said, turning back to us. I need to face everyone. And tell them what happened. Mila, you don't owe anyone an explanation, I said. We can just leave through the back door. Let people think whatever they want to think. No. Her voice was firm. These people came here today to celebrate with me. They deserve to know why. There's no celebration. And Matthew doesn't get to just disappear and leave everyone wondering what happened. We walked out of the bridal room together to find the main sanctuary still half full of guests who seemed reluctant to leave without some kind of explanation. Matthew was nowhere to be seen, but his mother Victoria was sitting in the front pew. Looking exhausted and sad, Mila walked to the front of the church and turned to face the crowd. Her voice was clear and steady as she spoke. I want to thank everyone for coming today to what was supposed to be my wedding. I know you're all confused about what just happened, and you deserve an explanation. The church fell completely silent, everyone straining to hear her words. I learned today that the man I was about to marry has been lying to me about fundamental aspects of his life. He told me his parents were dead when his mother is very much alive. He told me he'd never been married when he's apparently been married twice before. And he's been unfaithful to me throughout our entire relationship. A murmur of shock rippled through the congregation. I want you all to know that I'm grateful this came to light before we were legally married, even though it's painful and embarrassing. I'm especially grateful to the people who had the courage to speak up today, including my mother, who risked our relationship to protect me from making the biggest mistake of my life. She looked directly at me as she said this, and I felt tears streaming down my face. There won't be a wedding today, and there won't be a reception. But there will be a lesson learned about the importance of truth in relationships, and the value of family members who love you enough to tell you difficult truths. With that, she lifted her chin and walked back down the aisle with dignity and grace, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a symbol of the life she'd almost lived but was now choosing to leave behind. As we reached the back of the church, Victoria approached us. Mila, she said, I'm so sorry about my son. I failed as a mother somewhere along the way, and innocent people like you have paid the price for my failures. Mila looked at this woman who had just destroyed her wedding day and saved her life in the same moment. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for having the courage to speak up when it mattered. Victoria handed her a card. If you ever need anything, if Matthew tries to contact you or cause you any trouble, please don't hesitate to call me. I'll do whatever I can to help. As we walked out of the church together, Mila slipped her hand into mine for the first time since she was a little girl. I'm sorry I was angry with you, she said quietly. You were trying to protect me. I'm sorry I didn't find a better way to tell you the truth, I replied. I'm sorry your wedding day had to be destroyed for you to be free of him. She squeezed my hand. My wedding day wasn't destroyed, Mom. My wedding to the wrong man was prevented. That's completely different. As we reached the parking lot, she turned to look back at the church one more time. You know what the strangest part is? She said. I feel lighter than I have in months. I didn't realize how much energy it was taking to ignore all those little warning signs, to make excuses for things that didn't make sense, to try to be the perfect fiance for someone who didn't deserve it. I looked at my daughter, still in her wedding dress, her makeup streaked with tears, her carefully planned life in ruins, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. I saw strength. I saw clarity. I saw a woman who had just discovered she was capable of surviving the unthinkable and emerging stronger on the other side. The wedding that never happened had given her something far more valuable than a marriage certificate. It had given her back herself. 6 months later, I was sitting in my backyard garden when Mila called with news that made my heart sing. Mom, you'll never guess what happened today. Tell me, I said, setting down my watering can and settling into the chair I'd been using to watch my tomatoes grow. After the chaos of the wedding that never was, I'd found peace in simple things like gardening, reading, and spending quiet evenings with my daughter. I got promoted to senior marketing director. And not just any promotion, they're creating the position specifically for me. Full autonomy over campaigns, a team of 5 people, and a salary that's more than I ever imagined making. Mila, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. The best part is, they said they were impressed by my resilience and leadership during difficult times. Apparently, the way I handled everything with Matthew showed them I could manage crisis situations with grace and professionalism. I smiled, thinking about how far she'd come since that devastating day in the church. The first few weeks after the wedding had been rough. Mila had to deal with canceling the honeymoon, returning wedding gifts, and fielding questions from well-meaning friends and relatives who wanted to know what had really happened. But she'd handled it all with a strength and maturity that amazed me. There's something else, Mila continued. I've been seeing someone. My heart jumped, but not with worry this time. With hope. Tell me about him. His name is David. He's a teacher at the elementary school near my office. We met at a coffee shop 3 months ago when he helped me carry my laptop bag after I spilled my drink all over myself. She laughed, and the sound was light and genuine in a way it hadn't been during her relationship with Matthew. He sounds nice. What's he like? He's real, Mom. Completely genuine. He told me about his divorce on our second date, not because he wanted sympathy, but because he believes in honesty from the beginning. He's still friends with his ex-wife because they have a daughter together, and he wanted me to know that was part of his life. The contrast with Matthew was stark and encouraging. Where Matthew had built elaborate lies about his past, David was offering transparency. Where Matthew had hidden his relationships, David was open about his complicated family situation. He sounds like someone who's learned from his mistakes, I said. That's exactly what I thought. And Mom, he knows everything about what happened with Matthew. I told him the whole story on our third date because I didn't want there to be any secrets between us. You know what he said? What? He said he was grateful that I'd learned to recognize red flags, because it meant I wouldn't settle for anything less than real love and genuine respect. He said what happened to me was horrible, but it had made me stronger and wiser. Tears sprang to my eyes. This was what I had hoped for my daughter, not just escape from a toxic relationship, but the wisdom to recognize and appreciate genuine love when it appeared. When do I get to meet him? I asked. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Would you like to come to dinner this Sunday? I thought I could cook that lasagna recipe you taught me, and you two could get acquainted. I would love that. After we hung up, I sat in my garden thinking about the strange ways life unfolds. 6 months ago, I had stood in a church and watched my daughter's carefully planned future disintegrate in front of 300 guests. It had been one of the most painful experiences of my life, but also one of the most necessary. The phone rang again, interrupting my thoughts. This time it was Sarah. Bonnie, I have some news I thought you'd want to hear. Good news or bad news? Definitely good news. Matthew was arrested yesterday. I sat up straighter. Arrested? For what? Financial fraud. Remember that private investigator Victoria hired? Well, she kept investigating even after the wedding was called off. Turns out Matthew had been running a sophisticated con game for years. He would get engaged to successful women, gain access to their financial information, and then systematically drain their accounts while making it look like legitimate expenses. My blood ran cold. That was his plan with Mila? According to the investigator, yes. He'd already started the process. Remember how Mila quit her job and moved in with him? That was step 1, make her financially dependent. Step 2 was gaining access to her savings account, which he was planning to do after they were married by convincing her they needed to combine their finances for tax purposes. How many women did he do this to? At least 7, possibly more. The investigation is ongoing. But here's the really satisfying part, his mother Victoria is the one who turned him in. She'd been documenting his crimes for years, collecting evidence from his victims. When she saw him about to do it again with Mila, she decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. I thought about Victoria, the elegant woman who had stood up in that church and destroyed her own son's wedding to protect my daughter. The courage that must have taken, the pain of having to choose between protecting strangers and protecting her child. Is she okay? I asked. Victoria, I mean. That couldn't have been easy for her. She's the one who called me with the news. She wanted me to tell you and Mila that justice was finally being served. She said she's been carrying the guilt of his crimes for years, feeling responsible for not stopping him sooner. After Sarah and I finished talking, I called Mila immediately to share the news. He's been arrested, she asked, and I could hear the shock in her voice. For financial fraud. Sarah said he's done this to at least 7 women over the years. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Mila said, very quietly, I could have been number 8. But you weren't. You're safe, you're successful, and you're building a new life with someone who deserves you. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Of course. Do you ever regret what happened that day? Do you ever wish you had found a different way to handle the situation? I thought about it carefully before answering. I regret that you had to be hurt and humiliated. I regret that your wedding day became traumatic instead of joyful. But do I regret saving you from marrying a criminal who would have destroyed your life? Never. Good, she said, her voice strong and certain. Because I've been thinking about that day a lot lately. Especially since I started dating David. And I realized that what happened wasn't just about saving me from Matthew. It was about teaching me what real love looks like. What do you mean? Real love is what you did that day, Mom. Real love is risking everything, your relationship with me, my happiness, my opinion of you, to protect someone from harm. Real love is choosing truth over comfort, even when the truth is devastating. I felt tears streaming down my face. Mila, Matthew never would have done that for me. If he'd seen me about to make a terrible mistake, he would have let me make it if it served his purposes. He might have even encouraged me to make it. But you risked losing me forever to save me from a man who would have destroyed me piece by piece. I couldn't live with myself if I had let you marry him knowing what I knew. And that's the difference between real love and manipulation. Matthew kept secrets to control me. You revealed secrets to free me. Matthew made me smaller and more dependent. You helped me become stronger and more independent. Matthew saw me as a prize to be won. You see me as a daughter to be protected and cherished. We were both crying now, 6 months of accumulated emotion finally finding release. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, I said through my tears. Not because of what happened with Matthew, but because of how you've chosen to grow from it. You could have become bitter and closed off, but instead you've become wiser and more open to real love. I learned from the best, she said. From a mother who showed me what it means to love someone enough to risk everything for their well-being. The following Sunday, I drove to Mila's apartment for dinner with her and David. I was nervous, which surprised me. I'd been so focused on protecting my daughter from the wrong man that I hadn't given much thought to what it would be like to meet the right one. David answered the door, a tall, gentle-looking man with kind eyes and an easy smile. He shook my hand warmly and invited me in, immediately putting me at ease. Mrs. Richards, Mila has told me so much about you. I feel like I already know you. Please, call me Bonnie. And I hope she's told you good things. She told me you're the reason she's free to be with me today, he said simply. That makes you pretty much my hero. Over dinner, I watched David interact with my daughter. He listened when she spoke, asked thoughtful questions about her work, and clearly delighted in her accomplishments. When she told a story about a difficult client, he offered support without trying to fix the problem for her. When she mentioned feeling tired, he suggested she rest while he cleaned up, but didn't insist when she said she preferred to do it together. Everything about their interaction spoke of mutual respect, genuine affection, and healthy boundaries. It was everything her relationship with Matthew had not been. David, I said as we were finishing dessert, Mila tells me you have a daughter. I do. Emma, she's 8. She lives with her mother during the week and spends weekends with me. She's the light of my life. That must be complicated sometimes, dating while co-parenting. It can be, he admitted. But I've learned that honesty is the only way to build something real. I need to be with someone who understands that Emma will always be my first priority, and I need to be with someone who has her own priorities and interests beyond our relationship. I glanced at Mila, who was smiling as she listened to him talk about his daughter. This was what healthy love looked like, 2 complete people choosing to share their lives, rather than 2 incomplete people trying to fill the gaps in each other. I drove home that evening. I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. 6 months ago, I had been a mother desperate to save her daughter from a terrible mistake. Tonight, I was a mother celebrating her daughter's wisdom in choosing genuine love over convincing lies. The phone call I received the next morning put the perfect capstone on the evening. Bonnie, this is Victoria Davidson. I hope you don't mind me calling. Not at all. Sarah told me about Matthew's arrest. How are you holding up? Better than I expected, actually. I wanted to call and thank you. Thank me? Victoria, you're the one who saved my daughter. You stood up in that church and told the truth when it would have been easier to stay silent. But you gave me the courage to do it, she said. When I saw you there with Sarah, when I realized that other people were willing to risk everything to protect Mila from my son, I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I'd been carrying the burden of his crimes alone for so long, feeling like I couldn't betray my own child. But seeing you and Sarah there, ready to sacrifice your relationship with your daughter to save her, made me realize that real love sometimes means letting someone face the consequences of their actions. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And the bravest. I called to tell you that the investigation has expanded. They think Matthew may have defrauded women in other states as well. There could be dozens of victims. But more importantly, I wanted you to know that your daughter isn't just safe, she's helped save other women too. If you hadn't been brave enough to investigate, if you hadn't brought Sarah to that church, if you hadn't been willing to risk everything to tell the truth, Matthew would still be out there destroying lives. After Victoria hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee, thinking about the ripple effects of difficult choices. The decision to confront Matthew that night in the parking lot had saved my daughter. The decision to investigate his past had uncovered a pattern of abuse. The decision to risk our relationship to tell her the truth had freed her to find real love, and somewhere out there, women I would never meet were safe from a predator because I had been willing to be the mother who risked everything to protect her child. That evening, Mila called with one final piece of news. Mom, David asked me something tonight. Oh? He asked if I thought you'd like to go fishing with him and Emma this weekend. Apparently, Emma loves to fish but her mother doesn't, and he thought you might enjoy teaching her some of the techniques you taught me when I was little. I smiled, remembering summer mornings when Mila was young, sitting by the lake with our fishing poles, talking about everything and nothing. Tell him I'd love to go fishing with them. Good, because I already said yes. And Mom? I love you. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for forgiving me for the way I had to do it. As I hung up the phone, I realized something profound had happened over these past 6 months. I hadn't just saved my daughter from a bad marriage. I discovered something about the nature of real love that I'd never fully understood before. Love isn't just about supporting someone's dreams and celebrating their happiness. Sometimes love is about being willing to destroy someone's dreams in order to save their future. Sometimes love is about being hated in the moment so that you can be thanked for a lifetime, and sometimes, love is about trusting that the person you've raised will eventually understand that everything you did, even the painful things, even the things that seemed cruel at the time, came from a place of absolute, unconditional devotion to their well-being. Matthew had taught my daughter what fake love looks like. David was teaching her what real love looks like. But I had taught her something even more valuable. I had taught her what it feels like to be loved so completely that someone would risk everything to protect you, and that, I realized, was the greatest gift I could ever give her.